So, good morning, one and all. So I'm Dr. M. Sukadev, working as assistant professor in Satyam Institute of Technology and also a research consultant for Wilma Communication. And I thank the organizer and Wilma Communication for giving me an opportunity for this presentation on fundamentals of antennas. I hope the slide is visible. May I proceed, sir? Vinod, sir? Hello. Okay. So I'll go with my presentation, and you have seen the presentation of the progress of Wilma Communication and what are all the projects they have involved and been working on. And being a accommodation and after joining Wilma Communication as an external consultant, we get a better opportunity to learn many things practically, actually. So being in academics, we deal with the theoretical aspects. So an exposure with Wilma Communication has helped us to enhance the practical knowledge on the antenna design, application, installation, and so on. Okay. And today, my presentation would be about the fundamentals of antenna and without much mathematical treatment. Okay. So it is going to just explain the basic aspects. Okay. To start with, what is an antenna here? So we all know it's an important device for any communication system because the signal has to be radiated into the space and the antenna acts as a transducer in converting the electrical signal to electromagnetic waves, or at the receiving side it converts back the electromagnetic waves to electrical signal. So we could say the antenna is acting as a transducer and forms an important part of any wireless communication device actually. Okay. So we all know this basics. Without antenna, there could be no wireless communication possible actually. So let us take, we have a transmission line, two-wire transmission line excited with the source, and now the job of the antenna is to couple this energy coming from the source into the free space actually. And before using an antenna, so let us see how the field in a transmission line gets distributed for a two-wire case. So you could see in the picture a two-wire transmission line excited with a sinusoidal source. So, and this will cause the electrons to flow through the conductors, and which could create the magnetic field around the conductor, and as well as it will establish electric field between the positive and negative conductor, and we could see the electric field and magnetic field both are perpendicular to each other actually. So if the load impedance is matched to the source, the load is going to absorb all the power coming from the transmission line and nothing will get radiated actually. If you have kind of loads that will absorb all the power and nothing will get radiated actually. So what will happen if this is a case just which shows the field distribution between two-wire transmission line actually. So what will happen to the field or the energy when the ends are left open, when the two ends are left open without connecting any load? What will happen here is, so some energy will get leaked from the transmission line. So you could see in this picture, the transmission line is exited with the source and there is no load connected to that, and the two lines are just left open actually. So under this condition, there could be some escape of energy from the transmission line. We could say it is radiation. So some of the energy exited by the source gets coupled into the free space and it could travel actually. But under this condition where the lines are left open, as shown in figure A, the radiation or the energy coupled into the free space will be negligible actually. We have very little amount of energy going out, and probably if you are within 1 meters of the line, you'll be able to pick up some energy, and beyond that, you won't get any signal propagation. So in order to couple the energy completely into the free space, what has to be done, right? So obviously we use the antenna, we connect the antenna to the transmission line to do the job actually. So how we can make a very simple antenna here? So even we could convert the two-wire line into an effective antenna by just bending the lines at the end at right angles to each other. And if you keep that extra bend, which is vertical to that axis of the transmission line to a length of lambda by 4, then you could see the maximum energy coupled into the free space. Right? So this thing, the antenna could be simply a wire actually. You don't think anything big about the antenna. It could be simply a wire. And only thing, the length matters actually. If the length of the wire you are using, which is connected to the transmission line, is lambda by 4, to be simple, a fraction of wavelength. If it is a fraction of wavelength, then you could have better coupling of energy from the source into the free space. So the common antenna dimensions would be lambda by 4 or lambda by 2. And the example you see here in figure B is the top line is bent over a length of lambda by 4, and the bottom line also has a length of lambda by 4. The total length of these lines would be lambda by 2. And so we call this as a lambda by 2 antenna or off wavelength antenna. And more common name to this is a dipole antenna. We have two poles extending from the transmission lines of length lambda by 4, each element having a length lambda by 4. It is generally called as a dipole antenna. So what you see in this picture makes up a very simple dipole antenna which can couple the energy into the free space actually. So this is the thing, we not think much big about antenna design. It could be done as simple as possible, and we could witness some people in the travel bus could use a wire connected to the FM receiver, and they just hang on somewhere in that, and it could effectively pick up the signal FM stations, and we could get better clarity, right? So it's simply a wire which is acting as the antenna. Just the length does matters. And even in most of your mobile phones, if you tune into FM, it asks you to plug in the headphone, right? So why? Because the built-in antenna inside the mobile phone is meant for the microwave frequency, because you have a patch antenna inside which will work in the gigahertz range 1.2 in that operating bands of the mobile phone. So for FM, they didn't have any built-in antennas. So what they do is when you connect your headphone to a mobile phone, so that itself, that wire length of the headphone will act as the antenna for that FM pickup actually. So that's the reason why we get a better FM reception when you connect your headphone to the mobile handset actually. So the headphone wire picks up the signal and it acts as an antenna when you are listening to FM as well actually. Okay. So all these categories comes under wire antennas because it's just a wire which is converted to antennas. Okay. Right. And this about this antenna is simply a length of wire. Okay. Instead of wire, I can also use a metal rod, a rod of certain length, lambda by 2 or lambda by 4. A rod would be a little bit heavy, so even you can just use a tube, like an aluminum tube of desired diameter and length, you can, because it will be more rugged than a simple wire actually. Because if you are using a wire, you have to hang it somewhere, fix it somewhere. If you use a metal rod or a metal tube, it can be easily fixed on top of the structure, and it has some resistance towards that wind speed and all that, right? So the performance will not get degraded under various atmospheric conditions. Okay. So the next point is even nowadays people started using dielectric materials for radiation. It need not be earlier the definition is antenna is a conductor of specific length, but nowadays people even use dielectric material of length lambda by 4 or lambda by 2 for radiation of energy into the free space. Okay. And one point to remember is the radiation will be more effective when the length or size of the antenna approaches fraction of the wavelength, and more common length is 1 off wavelength and 1 lambda by 4, 1/4 wavelength we used to say actually. Okay. So what you see in this picture is the orientation of the electric field, magnetic field with respect to the direction of propagation. So how the field coming out of the antenna propagates in free space, and it will travel as a transverse electromagnetic wave. It means where transverse means perpendicular, you all know that. So the electric field and the magnetic field will lie mutually perpendicular to the direction of propagation. So in this TM wave, the three elements, the direction of propagation, the electric field and the magnetic field, all the three are mutually perpendicular, and that's a. So this picture shows how the electric field, magnetic field are oriented with respect to the direction of propagation, and these three components are mutually perpendicular, and so we call it as the transverse electromagnetic wave. So this is a technical name of the radio waves coming out of the antenna. So most of the waves that travel in free space will have this configuration as transverse electromagnetic waves actually. Okay. And so the free space has some resistance to the electromagnetic wave. As electromagnetic wave travels through the free space, so it has to face some resistance offered by the free space, actually the matter particles present in it. So, and this generally called as the wave impedance or intrinsic impedance of the free space, and this is a constant because it depends upon the material or the environment. So it's generally 377 ohms. The wave impedance of a free space, it's around 377 ohms actually. For any other material, if you want to know what is the wave impedance, we can substitute the dielectric constant epsilon r of the particular medium, and then we can find out what will be the impedance, wave impedance of this. So what is the significance of it? So it's visible? Okay. So the significance of wave impedance is that you can estimate, you are sending some electromagnetic energy from the source through the antenna into the space, right? So how long the wave could travel? So what will be the level of attenuation? So what will be the level of absorption by the free space? So how much energy will be absorbed by that? So that is a factor of this wave impedance actually. So how long our wave can travel and what will be the amount of attenuation in a particular medium. So that is decided by this wave impedance of the particular medium. That's it. Its importance actually. So for all free space conditions, we assume the free space wave impedance as 377 because epsilon r is 1 for that r particle in the free space actually. Then the other factor to consider is you have excited your antenna and now the electromagnetic energy is created and it's traveling down the free space, right? So we classify the region near the antenna into two actually. The region near your antenna, which is generally called as the near field region, and when you move away certain distance from the antenna, approximately we used to say when you go away 10 wavelengths from your antenna, then we say the region is called as far field region actually. So now what is this or this near field and far field if you say? So in the near field you could see in the picture that the electromagnetic waves is not, it's somewhat having a spherical shape actually. As you move on to the far field, when you just move a little bit away from your antenna, in the far field region you can consider that electromagnetic waves as a planar waves where the electric field, the magnetic field, we assume it is mutually perpendicular, exactly 90 degree, right? So that condition is valid only in the far field region actually, okay? So we can consider the TM waves as a planar wave in the far field region. So how do we know which region is near field and which region is far field? What's the boundary that separates that? So that's depends upon the antenna size actually and the frequency. So in this slide you could see the equation, the mathematical equation, simplified equation, which gives the boundary actually. So when the distance from the antenna is less than 0.62 of root 2 d cubed by lambda, where d is the size of the antenna, okay, if it is diameter, or generally we could say it is the size of the antenna, and lambda is the wavelength, which is a function of frequency. We start here. So wave impedance, this is where we started. Okay. So the importance of wave impedance is it's an indication of the amount of attenuation that will happen as the wave travels through the free space actually. For normal free space it is 377 ohms, and based on the different mediums, the dielectric constant will decide what is the wave impedance for different mediums actually. Then the other factor of importance is the near field and far field region. This simply the region surrounding an antenna is classified into near field region and far field region. So, may I proceed, sir? It's visible, right? Hello?
Yeah, yes, sir. It's visible.
Okay, okay. So, the antenna radiates energy into the free space, and the region somewhere near your antenna up to 10 wavelengths of the frequency of excitation is generally termed as the near field region, and the distance beyond the 10, far away from 10 wavelengths of the signal frequency, it is called as far field region. So what is significance of this two region is that as long as you are in the near field region, the electromagnetic waves will appear spherical. It will have spherical wavefronts actually. So the ideal conditions of TEM wave will not apply over there. When you move away to the far field region, the electromagnetic waves looks fairly planar. It means the electric field and magnetic field can be considered exactly mutually 90 degrees to the direction of propagation. And what we assume for the TEM wave characteristics can be applied in this far field region. Okay, so the distance depends upon the wavelength of excitation. So this slide gives the mathematical expression to compute how long is the near field region and how long is the far field region. The far field region is also called as the Fraunhofer region, and this is a distance greater than 2d squared by lambda, where d is... Yes?
Sir?
Any disturbance?
Your screen is not visible now, sir. Please, sir.
Still visible to others. It's visible only, screen.
Just maximize your percentage.
Now, sir? Hello?
Yeah, yes, sir. Apart from sir, please turn on all your mics now, please.
Yeah, it's on only. Mic is on. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Okay. So,
You just start, sir.
okay. I'll go to that. So, this using this equation easily you can compute where the far field region starts. So 2d squared by lambda, where d is the dimension of the antenna actually. So all antenna measurements, if you are going to measure the radiation pattern and other characteristics of the antenna, it should be carried out in the far field region. Whatever measurement we take in the near field region is not valid actually, because the measurement we have made in the near field region will not be the same as you move away to other distances. But once you make a measurement in the far field region, the characteristics remains the same for all the distance beyond this boundary actually. So all practical measurements of antenna should be done only in the far field region actually. Okay, so the third thing of interest is antenna polarization. So what do you mean by this? So polarization is nothing but the direction of the electric field, magnetic field with respect to Earth actually. When you say antenna, when you define antenna polarization, we talk about the direction of the electric field with respect to ground. So if I'm having an antenna and it radiates energy such that the electric field is perpendicular to the Earth, then I say the antenna is radiating vertically polarized wave, because in my radiation the electric field is always perpendicular to the Earth's surface actually. So such antennas are called as vertically polarized antennas actually. Then there are some antennas which could radiate energy such that the electric field lie parallel to the Earth's surface, and that's called as an horizontally polarized antennas actually. So you could see in the diagram, if the electric field is parallel to, here the point to remember, we stop with respect to the Earth actually. So if the electric field produced by the antenna is parallel with respect to the Earth, then we say it is a horizontally polarized wave. Then my electromagnetic waves produced are horizontally polarized waves. And if an antenna produces electric field such that it lies parallel to the, perpendicular to the surface, then it is called a vertically polarized antenna. Okay. So in the previous case, we have taken the dipole antenna, this two element antenna, right? So this dipole antenna will radiate horizontally polarized wave. You'll see that in the next. That's an example of a horizontally polarized antenna. Okay. So what then? There are other polarization also. So we can also generate electromagnetic waves such that the direction of the electric field doesn't remain constant at perpendicular to the earth, or neither it is parallel. It keeps on changing its direction. So it's possible to design antennas which can generate that electromagnetic waves with it is called a helical elliptical polarization or circular polarization, where the direction of the electric field doesn't remain constant. It keeps on changing with time actually. So what's the significance of this antenna polarization? What antenna should I use? It should be horizontally polarized, or should be vertically polarized, or it should be circularly polarized. So the importance is here. For example, you are radiating signal from a vertically polarized antenna, for example, a monopole, a single rod connected to the source. So that's a monopole antenna. So it will produce.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So you go to previous starting of polarization. This one, sir.
Okay, sir. Okay, antenna polarization. Okay. So what is antenna polarization is? It simply tells what is the direction of electric field produced by the antenna with respect to earth actually. So if the electric field radiated by the antenna is perpendicular to the earth's surface, then we say it is a vertically polarized wave. The antenna is called a vertically. Antenna polarization is the direction of electric field with respect to earth actually. If the field produced is perpendicular to the earth's surface. So I'll repeat again, no problem. So antenna polarization defines the direction of electric field with respect to the earth's surface. If the direction of the electric field produced by the antenna is perpendicular to the earth, then we say the antenna radiates vertically polarized waves. So if the direction of the electric field is parallel or horizontal to the, with respect to the surface, then we say the antenna radiates horizontally polarized waves. Okay. An example for horizontally polarized antennas is our dipole, which I'm going to see next, and vertically polarized antennas are the monopoles, a single rod connected to the source actually. And then the third polarization is circular polarization. So in this case, the direction of the electric field keep on changing actually. So it just rotates. The direction of the electric field rotates around the axis of the direction of propagation, and we say this is a circularly polarized wave actually. And what is the significance of antenna polarization with respect to the reception? Particularly in reception, it is more significant because, so if you are radiating energy with a vertically polarized antenna, for example, a monopole antenna, it cannot be received by a horizontally polarized antenna actually. The transmit and receive antenna should have same polarization. If you are transmitting with a vertically polarized antenna, a monopole for example, then it should be received only with a vertically polarized antenna. It can be any antenna type, but the polarization of the antenna should be vertical. So if you try to use a horizontally polarized antenna, you will not be able to receive the signal actually. Nothing will be received in the other side actually. So that's the significance. So even if there is a small change in the polarization, even if I have two polarized antennas, vertically polarized antennas at the transmitter. So what is the advantage of this circularly polarized antenna is that it can be used to receive both vertically polarized as well as horizontally polarized waves actually. So if I am transmitting with a vertical antenna, I'll be able to receive the signal with a circularly polarized wave. And the same case for a horizontally polarized wave. If you are transmitting with a horizontally polarized wave, you'll be able to receive with a circularly polarized antenna. So what would be the polarization of the incoming electromagnetic waves? With a circularly polarized antennas, we'll be able to get it actually. So that's the reason why for satellite communication, so they prefer using a circularly polarized wave antenna at the satellite, actually at the satellite stations. They use that circularly polarized wave so that the ground station, they'll be able to pick up with any of the type actually. Both circular polarized antennas will be used. At the satellite as well as the ground station, they try using circularly polarized wave antennas. So this is important. So we should be more careful about the antenna polarization also. what is being used at the transmitting side. So you have to use appropriate antenna at the receiving side as well, actually. So otherwise, you'll be losing your signal. So antenna polarization is also an important factor. Okay. Then the other term is just a property of antenna reciprocity. So it means a same antenna can be used at the transmitter as well
So
as.
please maximize it.
Okay. Now, are you able to see the screen?
Okay, sir.
Okay. So, antenna reciprocity just tells the characteristics or performance of the antenna is same whether you use it for radiation or whether you use it for intercepting electromagnetic signal at the receiver, actually. So the property remains the same in both applications, as a transmitter as well as receiver. So antenna is basically a reciprocal device, actually. Okay. So the most common, very simple antennas in the earlier days is the off-wave dipole, the monopole antenna, and other things. So this is a more fundamental antenna. Already we have seen it, just a bent out transmission line. Even we can separately make a dipole antenna and then connect to the transmission. It's a more convenient antenna to use with the coaxial cable because its inherent impedance is around 75 ohms, so it can be conveniently connected to coaxial cables without the need of matching network. So what is a dipole antenna? It's just two elements with length lambda by 4, actually. So the two elements are one connected to the positive terminal of the source, the other to the negative terminal of the source, and then you could have the radiation coming out of this antenna, actually. For a practical design, the lambda should be calculated with the relation 492 by f. So even though theoretically lambda is c by f, here you should use this 492 by f for where the frequency is in megahertz, actually. So for exact calculation, because the practical length should be 95% smaller than the ideal length, actually. So ideal length is lambda by 2, but the practical length should be 95% of that to overcome the end effect or the connection. The end point we used to say, where we connect the antenna to that transmission line, just a sort of matching. So more precise resonance you'll get when the length is 95% of the ideal lambda by 2 dimension. Okay? Right. This is a practical dipole, and now you could see the two elements. They are not connected together; they are separated. The two elements have no physical contact because one goes to the positive terminal of the source, the other goes to the negative terminal of the RF source, actually. Right. So this is how a practical dipole antenna will look like. And the third thing, we have seen what is an antenna, about polarization, and I'll tell this a dipole antenna radiates a horizontally polarized waves because that happens when you keep this antenna, the two rods, when they are parallel to the earth, then the electromagnetic energy going out of this antenna will have electric field parallel to the earth, actually. So it is a horizontally polarized antenna. The radiation coming off of this dipole antenna will have horizontal polarization, actually. Okay. And this is about the radiation pattern. So what significance of radiation pattern is, from this radiation pattern we can understand, so what is the directional coverage of our antenna. If I am using an antenna to radiate energy, so what are the angular positions that will be covered by your antenna? If you look at this dipole, so it's not covering the entire 360 degree. It covers maximum angle around 120 degree on the left side and the right side, actually. On the two sides, perpendicular to the axis of the dipole, you have radiation, but along the axis, in the direction of the axis of the dipole, there is no radiation at all. So radiation pattern is also a very important thing. If you are using a dipole antenna for transmission and then standing straight in the direction of the axis of the dipole, you will not probably get, even if you are very near to the dipole, you will not get energy in the axis. So that means in the radiation pattern, the direction 90 degree and 270 degree, there is no radiation at all. But if you stand at 0 degree and 180 degree with respect to the antenna axis, then you will have a better signal strength even at a far away distance, actually. So we have to analyze what will be the radiation pattern of the antenna you are designing, so that you can tell this can be used for this particular application, like that. So a dipole antenna is not a good choice for a mobile tower because it will not radiate energy in all the directions, right? So people will not prefer using a dipole antenna for mobile. So radiation pattern is also a very significant thing because it decides in what direction your antenna radiates, actually. So that pattern depends upon the structure. We can do some changes. Can you modify the radiation pattern of the antenna? We can do it. But for a dipole, if you have 2 rods of length lambda by 2, this is fixed. Nothing can be done with that. We cannot change because of the geometry of the dipole. The radiation pattern would be like this, and nothing can be done with that. But by adding something else to it, it is possible to change the direction or the radiation pattern. It's possible to modify by doing some changes actually. The normal beam width of this dipole would be 120 degree perpendicular to the axis of the dipole. And if you design antennas, all these things can be done in the software actually. We have aeromatic simulation tools where we can create the dipole and analyze and see how the radiation pattern in all the angles, 3D pattern, 2D pattern, all this we will be able to analyze. But this is a factor to be remembered, polarization, and the next one is the radiation pattern, very important parameter of an antenna. Okay. So here you could see other picture. It shows the 3 different types of wire antennas. Dipole, we have seen the middle one is the dipole, where we have 2 rods of length lambda by 2, and the radiation pattern looks like a definite shape. You could see the second picture, it's a definite shape. The radiation along the sides and no radiation in the axis. So then the next one is the first one, the 1/4 wave monopole antenna. You see, it's a rod, just a single rod of length lambda by 4. So how we can connect the signal to it? You connect the positive terminal of your source to this rod and keep it on top of the roof of your building on a mountain top or somewhere, and negative terminal should be grounded. You can connect to the earth actually, and then this element on the top will act as a positive charge, and in this case what happens, the electric field starts from the top of your building and it just terminates in ground actually. So we could say the monopole antenna, the first one you see this picture, will produce vertically polarized waves because the positive charge is on the top of your building and the ground will act as the negative charge, right? So field lines has to terminate from a positive charge, start from a positive charge and terminate in the negative charge. So all the field lines will be perpendicular to earth actually. So the monopole antenna can be used to radiate energy with a vertical polarization actually. It's the most simplest form of antenna, lambda by 4 monopole, single rod. Instead of using 2, we can also use only 1, and you can keep it at the top of your building or a mountain somewhere you can use. And the radiation pattern, one significance of the radiation pattern is it is omnidirectional, because if you keep the positive charge on top of your building, your element, that lambda by 4 element, and earth being the ground plane, so all the fields will start from the positive charge and flows to ground in all the 3 dimensions, all the 360 degree, around 360 the field is terminating from your positive charge and comes down, starting from the positive charge and terminating down to the earth actually. So it will produce a omnidirectional radiation pattern. It means the radiation will be in all the 360 degrees. If you are using a monopole, the radiation will be in all the 360 degrees actually. Okay? So that's what you see in the circular second picture. It is omnidirectional. And the top picture, you could see why it is shown 2 half circles. This is a case if the element is fixed to the ground. If I fix the element just on top of the ground surface, then the pattern would be like this. But if you fix the lambda by 4 monopole antenna somewhere on top and you hold it on your hand or something, then the radiation would be omnidirectional actually. Then this one. So the dipole antenna radiates energy in 2 directions, right? For example, some people could have seen this in older televisions. In our young days, we use this antenna for TV reception. When we have used the older color TV and black and white TV, the most common antenna for TV reception is the Yagi-Uda antenna. So Yagi-Uda is nothing but a simple dipole. It's a dipole only. They add additional elements to it. So one passive rod to the left and more short rods, one longer rod to the left of the dipole and shorter length rods to the right of the dipole. If you add, then it is called a Yagi antenna. But the signal is given only to the dipole, only to the dipole element the signal is given, and all the other rods you see are passive elements. They're not excited actually. So what is the use of this? Why we have to use Yagi antennas? You could see the pattern. Now the radiation is only in one direction actually. Okay. So if you want to convert the bidirectional radiation pattern of a standard dipole into a unidirectional radiation pattern, you want to radiate all the energy in a particular direction. That's in reception we used to see in the direction of TV station, we used to tune the antenna because it's a unidirectional antenna. If it is perfectly aligned to the direction of the TV station, you get maximum signal strength. So by adding that additional rods to the left, all the energy is rippled back in only one direction, and so it has unidirectional radiation pattern. That's the significance of Yagi antenna. It's a dipole antenna with the addition of a longer rod to the left of the dipole and shorter rods at the right of the dipole actually. So by adding more number of shorter rods to the right of the dipole, you can increase the directivity. It becomes more narrow. You can make the beam more narrower and narrower by adding more elements to this. So it could be able to pick up the most weakest signal actually. So that's again, some people could recall when you are near to the TV station, not the satellite TV. I am talking about the TV broadcast station, what they do from the earth actually. So when you are near your TV, just a dipole would be enough to pick it up. As you move away to longer distance, 300, 400 kilometers, people will use more rods in the Yagi antenna actually, so that it can increase the gain and directivity of the antenna, and it will be able to pick up the weakest form actually. And this is how we can bring in improvements to the basic antenna. So Yagi is one improvement to a basic structure of dipole, to have a unidirectional radiation pattern and to have higher gain. Higher gain in the sense even the weakest signal will be picked up by your antenna. So all this are family of wire antenna, simply a rod or a wire or a tube actually. Okay. Okay, so what is bandwidth? Okay, I've seen about the bandwidth of signals. My signal is 1 MHz, 2 MHz, like that. For example, for antennas also bandwidth is very important. You would consider this monopole or dipole. You can design for any required frequency by choosing length lambda by 2 or lambda by 4. But that's alone is not enough actually. We should also see what is the bandwidth of the antenna, because if my signal occupies a range of frequency, say 200 kilohertz, my signal bandwidth, I have modulated my information with some carrier frequency and it occupies 200 kilohertz bandwidth. Then if I design a dipole antenna, I can say I'm transmitting at say 1000 Hz. I can design a dipole antenna for 1000 Hz. That is not a problem. But I should see that antenna will be able to radiate for the entire 200 kilohertz will be able. Or if my antenna band is very small, 10 kilohertz, then my signal will not be radiated. It is operating at 1000 Hz, but its bandwidth is around plus or minus 10 kilohertz from the resonant frequency. Then the antenna is not suitable. So the other factor to be considered for an antenna performance is the bandwidth. So what is your signal bandwidth, and whether the antenna will have enough bandwidth to radiate your signal. You should see resonant frequency is one thing, and we should also see what is the bandwidth of antenna actually. The dipole will have a very narrow bandwidth. So people use other techniques to enhance the bandwidth of antenna actually. So bandwidth is the frequency range of operation of your antenna. Resonant frequency is particular frequency. Say I'm modulating information with carrier frequency 1000 Hz. So I just tend to design antenna for 1000 Hz, but I should also see what is the bandwidth occupied by my signal, and the antenna should also have the same bandwidth to accommodate my signal. Otherwise, your information will be lost actually. Okay, there are some techniques previously people have used to increase the bandwidth of the simple wire antenna. So instead of using a simple pipe or a rod, and they use some cone. These are olden days technique, but still we can apply this technique even in a microstrip advanced antenna design. The same concept you can bring in advanced microstrip antennas actually. You can make a cone in microstrip and you could see you'll achieve higher bandwidth. So in those days, people used physical cone itself. They want to have more bandwidth. They used, instead of uniform cross-sectional pipe, they used a cone on two sides to achieve higher bandwidth. A cone, a flat sheet of triangular shape, a corrugated sheet, all this can be used to increase the bandwidth of antennas actually. Okay, so this is what about the Yagi antenna I am talking about. It's a folded dipole. Is that rod is bent, and then it's the same dipole, but it's of longer length and it is bent into that U shape actually. So this is called as the folded dipole. This is what I said. When you add a longer rod to the right of your dipole, then all the energy will get reflected towards the left side. If you consider this as the right side, then all the energy will come back to this. That will act as a reflector, and all energy will come in only one direction. The simple folded dipole will have bidirectional radiation because there is no reflector here. When you add this reflector, you could see the energy coming out in the same direction. Okay, and this directors will help to increase. They will make it more and more directional actually by adding more number of. But the size of the directors should be very small when compared to the length of the dipole. The dimension will gradually reduce in size actually. So your antenna becomes more and more directional. Okay, is there any other method to increase the directivity? I want to make my radiation more directional, like a pencil beam, point to point. I want to radiate all the energy in single direction, in 1 degree, 2 degree beam. I don't want to radiate energy in the 120 degree. I don't want to cover that. I want to just have a pencil sort of beam. It is possible. So when you come to arrays, you can play with it actually. So whatever beam width you want, whatever gain you want, you can build an array of yourself. So I'm just telling what is array basically, what it is, that's all. So far we have seen single element, right? We have seen single element, a dipole, monopole, all these are single elements, single active elements. So only one element you have given the signal actually. So it's a single element antenna actually. What is an array is, it's a multi-element antenna, so multiple antennas combined in one structure. That's an array actually. So just to cascade several antennas together in a single structure, we say it is an array antennas. And what is the purpose of array antennas? So you could see this diagram here. Let us consider a simple dipole. You just use a single dipole. This is a general antenna symbol. You just take, I am having only one dipole element. Then the radiation pattern would be somewhat what you see in the second direction, right? Its response will be same in wider angle. The radiation is in wider angle actually. That's the meaning of this. So in certain direction, the gain is, response is max in the sense it will radiate more energy into that particular direction. In other direction, the radiation is very small and it's negligible. The first case is an omnidirectional case. So in all direction, the radiation is uniform actually. But here in the second picture, the radiation is different in different direction. In the center region, you have maximum radiation. Along the sides, it is less actually. So this is a case by adding 3 elements. Just for example, when you combine 3 elements. So in this case, when you come to arrays, you have to apply the signal to all the elements. In the Yagi antenna, what we have seen, this is not an active array actually. Even though we call it as array antenna, we give the signal only to this center element, the dipole element. And for this other rods, the signals are not applied actually. So it is just a passive array actually. But when you come to actual antenna arrays, all elements are active in the sense to all the elements we should apply the signal. The signal should be applied parallelly to all the elements. So if you have 3 elements put together in a single structure and you apply the signal to it with different ratio that you can control, and you will get a beam like this. Then the third picture you see here, you add 6 elements together. It's just a dipole. You add 6 dipoles together and give the signal. Then you could see the radiation becoming more narrow. It means it is going to cover only a particular region actually. So by adding more elements, that's an array. Just any antenna, maybe a microstrip antenna, a dipole, anything, it's up to you. So just cascade several elements in a single structure and give signal to all the elements. Then you could see the radiation pattern becomes narrowed down actually. So the advantage is it becomes more directional and it can travel longer distance. For a given power, the energy can travel very long distance actually. Then now this is more popular in 5G applications, phased array. So what is this is that it is same as in previous array what we have discussed, but you could see phase shifters introduced in the feed line of each element. We are giving signal to all, or we are just showing a receiver picture actually. You can consider as transmitting side also. We introduce a phase shift. This arrow mark with a circle represent a phase shifters. So if I excite each antenna with a different phase, the applied signal is given to each element with a different phase, then you will be able to change the direction. You are getting a beam. The beam is narrowed down because of the array. That's fine. And also, you can direct the beam in the desired direction. Say you want to direct all the energy in 0 degree, 50 degree, 90 degree, a particular direction you want to radiate all the energy in particular direction of interest, then that is possible with phased arrays. So by carefully adjusting the phase of the signal applied to all antennas, then you'll be able to either direct the energy into a desired direction, or you can convert your array to pick up signal from a particular direction actually, because the antenna is reciprocal. What you do for transmission is applicable for reception as well. So a phased array is more popular, and its popular application is beamforming. The concept what I've told now is called as beamforming in 5G and beyond 5G. This will be a very popular application. It will be a common thing in most of the stations, base stations they are going to install. So the system can detect in which direction the signal is coming, and it will radiate all the energy into that particular direction. This is going to definitely save a lot of energy, because you take a normal mobile station, what we have for 4G, it radiates energy in all the directions, whether the users are there or not. But when it comes to 5G with this beamforming technique employed in it, so the system can detect in which direction the users are making a call, and the radiation will be restricted to that particular direction only. So even you can create multiple beams. Instead of having only a single beam, you can also create multi-directional beams, 2 beams, 3 beams in desired direction. So that's a lot of scope you have in this phased array design actually. Either with wire antennas or with the patch antennas, anything to be able to do that. And it involves a bit of DSP also. You should have signal processing stuff. You can employ here and you'll be able to achieve this. The antenna combined with the DSP processor, you can make beamforming systems yourself. Okay. And this is a common antenna for an array actually. Most of you could have seen this boxes in all mobile phone towers actually. So that box is nothing but a dipole array actually. They'll put 4 or 5 dipoles together, and vertically it is placed actually. So in the box it is enclosed. It's not it's called sector antenna, but what is inside, if you open the box and see, it's an array of dipole, 4 or 5 elements of dipole. They will fix it. But now recent for 5G they are planning for microstrip arrays actually. Because why they have, particularly you could see that all the mobile stations will have, mobile towers will have 3 or 4 such sector antennas, because if they are using a 120-degree sector antenna, it means the radiation coming out of that antenna would cover 120-degree angle, that region in that 120-degree. Then to cover then all the directions around the tower, we need 3 such antennas actually. So you may find 3 sector antennas. Some people may use 4 antennas, 4 sector antenna. In that case, it means that each antenna, sector antenna covers 90-degree actually. So 4 such antennas will be used to cover all the 360. Instead of covering the entire area with a single antenna, if you fix individual arrays, then the signal quality will be good actually, and the range can also be sufficiently increased actually. So arrays will always play an important role in antenna design. Okay, so before going into this, if you have any queries, you can ask.
Hello, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, we are using for tower 4 dipole antennas for full radiation pattern.
Yes, sector antennas.
Yes, sir.
So
that we are using circular polarization antenna is better than this one.
You're right. So circular polarization can be used for that, but the problem with circular polarization antenna is their gain will be very less actually. So if I know, their gain will be very less actually. So where it is not possible to go with vertical or horizontally polarized antennas, we can go for this circular polarized, because in satellite no other go. If you radiate a particular polarization wave, as it travels down from the space through the Earth's atmosphere, the polarization will definitely change by 10 to 20 degree. So no other go, we have to use circularly polarized wave antennas actually. But we could get better signal this vertical or horizontally polarized waves. That's the reason they are not adapting that circularly polarized antennas for mobile applications. For a mobile station, mobile tower, but for your handset, it can be used actually. Wi-Fi handsets, it can be preferred. Portable mobile units, we can use a circularly polarized antenna, no problem with that.
Okay. Sir, one more.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yeah, yes.
Sir, I have a question regarding polarization.
Yes.
In polarization, we will have E plane polarization and H plane polarization. Whenever we see, simulate any radiation polarizations in radiation patterns.
Yes.
Can you please explain? Can you give some clarifications regarding that E plane and H plane patterns? Radiation patterns?
So actually, in the next session, day after tomorrow, we are going to simulate with that ANSYS electromagnetic tool, and I'll be presenting that. And that time, I will correlate with this.
Oh, sure.
Okay,
Sir,
sure.
one more question.
Yes. So right now, you can remember in a very simple way. So the electric field radiated by the antenna is perpendicular to the earth. It is a vertically polarized antenna actually. If the electric field is parallel to the earth's surface, it is a horizontally polarized wave. And that E and H plane we see that has a different meaning, which I will explain you clearly with the presentation and with the demonstration definitely. Day after tomorrow, I'll come back again.
Okay, sir.
I'll have some more points to be finished. May I continue or wind up the session?
I have a small question in the near field and far field.
Yes, ma'am.
In the slide you have mentioned in near field the E and H are distinct and in far field they are composite. What do you mean by that?
1 minute. Can you see this slide?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. So actually, the energy radiated from an antenna is more or less transverse electromagnetic wave, right? So it means the electric field, we assume the electric field and the magnetic field are mutually exactly 90 degree with respect to the direction of propagation. But in the near field, it is not the case because the wavefront is spherical. The wavefront is spherical. That concept will not apply over there. So the behavior is a little bit different in the near field region actually. So only in the far field, they become a perfect and ideal transverse electromagnetic. That too planar. We use the term planar EQ phase wavefronts, right? EQ phase means that's what only in the far field region. So we can consider that waves as a planes actually.
Okay.
They become a plane. That wavefront becomes a plane, vertical plane. Whereas in the near field region, they have a spherical locus actually. That wavefront will be spherical. Only in the far field region, they become a EQ phase wavefront. That concept is applied only in the far field region. They are mutually perpendicular exactly. They become almost a vertical plane actually. You can consider each wave as a plane. That's a thing actually.
Okay.
Is it clear?
Yeah, yes. Yes.
Okay.
You have mentioned as distinct and composite. Sir.
Where?
This
Okay,
one.
so no, it is radio with composite. It means a combination of the electric magnetic field mutually perpendicular to the direction of propagation. That's the meaning of this. It's not a mix actually, so it's a combination of the electric. Yes, combination. Sorry, that word is telling a different meaning. Sorry. Okay.
Okay.
And then I'll discuss two more parameters which are of importance. So radiation pattern we have seen, polarization we have seen, resonant frequency we have seen. Then the other important factor is return loss and VSWR. Okay, so if I am designing an antenna, I have to evaluate before fabrication, either the software, and after the software results are satisfied, I have to go for fabrication, right? So what are the parameters that should be analyzed to judge an antenna will be good for a practical application or not? And all this should be analyzed actually. Return loss, VSWR, impedance bandwidth. Impedance band is what I am talking about. The frequency range for which your antenna will be useful, which can radiate. Then off power beamwidth is the radiation pattern. From the radiation pattern, you'll find till what angle it will radiate. That refers to the off power beamwidth. And then the other factor is how do we judge the antenna will exactly work at the design frequencies. We have to see the return loss. And I'll just tell the basic, what is return loss actually. So you see, you consider the load as an antenna and the source as an excitation, maybe RF oscillator or something. And then we have some cabling between the source and the load actually. So we expect the source to deliver all the power to the load and the load should take all the power and radiate, convert that to electromagnetic waves actually. But in practice, what happens if the antenna impedance is different from the source? And you could see an example here. The source is having an impedance of 50 ohm and if my antenna has an impedance of 75 ohms, then there is a mismatch in the impedance. When there is an impedance mismatch between the transmission line and the load, what happens? Some of the power coming to the load will get reflected. We all know this. So if there is mismatch in the load impedances, there will be reflection of power taking place, right? So what is return loss and VSWR? This the picture shows a general scenario. We have a source and a load, and they have a little bit different impedances. So when the load impedance is different from the transmission line or from the source, what happens? Some of the energy what is coming from the source will get reflected, right? So in the second picture, you could see the blue color line shows the amplitude of the original signal. Okay, I'll repeat again. So we can say a source and a load, source impedance 50 ohms and a load of impedance 70 ohms. They are connected by a transmission line. And now due to the mismatch in the load of the source and mismatch in the impedance of the load and the source, what happens? Some of the power traveling from the source towards the load will get reflected. The load will not take all the power and will reflect back some of the energy back into the transmission line actually. So the second picture shows the blue color line in the graph indicates the amplitude of the signal that is coming from the source. And then because of the load mismatch, some of the power gets reflected by the load with a different force, because the reflected signal may not have same phase as the original one. So the reflected signal will have a different phase as shown by the gray color line actually, which is marked as reflection. The reflected power is small because the mismatch is somewhat less here. So a fraction of the incoming signal is reflected back actually. So if you consider the signal strength in the transmission line between the source and the load, these two will add up. The net signal strength is the sum of the original signal and the reflected signal. When this add up, what happens? The net signal in the transmission line will keep on fluctuating. So that's what denoted as the standing waves, the black color one actually. So that indicates the signal strength variation along the transmission line actually. So when the standing waves are produced, if the reflection is zero, if the load impedance is perfectly same as your source or the transmission line, it will take all the energy and radiate all the energy into the space, nothing goes back, then there is no reflection. So under the case, there won't be any standing waves in the transmission line between the source and load. There are no standing waves. What does it imply is the signal strength will be same throughout the transmission line. It's just not a waveform. It's just a variation of signal strength along the length of the transmission line. That's the meaning of the standing wave. That black color trace indicates how the signal strength varies along the transmission line between the source and load. So it shows there is fluctuation in the signal strength actually due to the reflected energy. When there is no mismatch, no reflection, and the signal strength will be same constant throughout the transmission line, and all the energy will get radiated from your antenna actually. So how do we quantize this? So that is reflection. I have a mismatch. And how do we quantize these values? That is VSWR, voltage standing wave ratio. So I will just simply measure what is the maximum amplitude of the signal, that is the maximum value of the standing wave. That refers to what is the maximum signal strength in the transmission line between the source and load. Somewhere it is maximum, somewhere it is minimum, right? So I'll just measure what is the maximum value signal strength and what is the minimum signal strength I'm getting. So in the black color waveform, we'll measure, we have to move we'll use a probe to move around the transmission line and see wherever we get maximum signal, I'll record what is the maximum power of the signal. Then I'll move again, the signal strength decreases, and I go to a point where the signal strength is minimum. So I'll measure these 2 points and take the ratio Vmax by Vmin. If I measure the maximum voltage in the line and the minimum voltage in the line and take that ratio, then I call this as voltage standing wave ratio. If I measure power, it is going to be simply SWR, the maximum power by the minimum power in the transmission line, right? So this variation is more, means there is more reflection, there is more mismatch. If there is no variation at all, there won't be any standing wave, the signal strength will be same throughout the line and the VSWR will be 1. 1 in the sense, it's an ideal case. 1 means it's an ideal case. Vmax and Vmin are same, means there is no variation in signal strength. So the ideal value of VSWR should be 1. It indicates no variation in the signal strength, no reflection, right? So for practical case, we accept VSWR up to 1.5. The signal strength, VSWR values up to 1.5, we accept. if I connect an antenna and measure this VSWR, and if its values within 1.5, then it can be considered for practical application. So return loss is also the same thing. It is more straightforward than the VSWR. So it is simply the ratio of the reflected power to the incident power. Simply you measure how much is the forward power and how much is the reflected power, take the ratio, that will give the return loss actually. So the return loss should be, for an ideal case, it should be, you say reflected power is 0, then 0 by anything is infinity. So for an ideal case, return loss should be infinity actually. So return loss is simply the ratio of the applied power to the reflected power actually. So VSWR is, we measure the signal strength along the line, and we measure what is the maximum signal strength, what is the minimum signal strength, then we take the ratio, and that is voltage. If you measure voltage, then we call it as voltage standing wave ratio. If you measure current, maximum and minimum current in the transmission line, it is ISWR. If you measure power, it is simply SWR actually. So return loss is a more straightforward calculation of the ratio of reflected power to the incident power actually. Okay, so you could see here it is VSWR and the significance of the VSWR value and the amount of reflected power. If I have VSWR, if I get VSWR as 1, then it means there is no reflection. And that symbol, the row symbol indicates it is the reflection, return loss as well actually. If the VSWR is 1.5, then there is 4% reflection. 4% of the incident power is reflected actually. So this is what's a limit actually. They will accept up to 1.5. The VSWR can be up to 1.5 for a practical antenna. So, and the return loss is a more clear explanation. I'll just simply, to understand at what frequency my antenna will work, I'll just plot the return loss for the various frequencies. This is an example of one practical antenna we have designed. And just the return loss of the antenna is plotted over different frequency. It is in decibels, right? So if complete reflection means what will happen, say return loss is 1 means what? The reflected power is same as the incident power. So both are equal. So the return loss is 1. And if you convert that to decibel, 10 log of the tray 1, it's 0, right? So return loss of 0 means complete reflection. So what I understand from this, at 1.5 hertz, the return loss is almost 0. It's 0 decibels. So it means return loss is 1 in numerical value. Complete reflection, whatever you give is completely reflected by your antenna. So the antenna is not radiating any power at all at these frequencies. So as you increase frequency, there is a little bit radiation. The radiation is slightly increasing, and you have the best radiation in this peak. So around 2.4 GHz, we could see in this marker 1, it is 2.8 GHz. I get a return loss of minus 20 dB. So what I understand from this plot is that the antenna radiates more effectively at 2.85 GHz. Then that's a peak resonant frequency, I could say. And what is the acceptable bandwidth of the antenna? How we can calculate what is the bandwidth of this antenna for what is the range of frequency the antenna can effectively radiate. So they have fixed a standard for this. That's called the minus 10 dB impedance bandwidth. You could have seen that. So impedance bandwidth is nothing but the range of frequencies from the minus 10 dB point. This is a graph, and you find out where the return loss goes below minus 10 dB. It starts here. So at this frequency around 2.56 or something, so it is going below minus 10 dB. And then again at this frequency, the return loss is higher than minus 10 dB, right? So this is the acceptable range. In a practical case, if the return loss is less than minus 10 dB, it is a functional frequency of an antenna. So now I can claim my antenna can work from this frequency to this frequency, and this is my impedance bandwidth or fractional bandwidth of this. So I could say it is 2.6 to 3.2, 3.15 something. I can use this antenna right from 2.6 GHz to 3.1 GHz. That is the bandwidth of my antenna. Okay. So we should not see this resonant, peak resonant alone. We should also see this, particularly 10 dB. So the frequency range between that 10 dB point is the operational bandwidth of your antenna. It is called as impedance bandwidth if you calculate with respect to this minus 10 dB. And then if I say the return loss is minus 10 dB, it means the reflected power would be 1/10 of the incident power. Actually 10 dB means 1/10 of the power is reflected back. That's acceptable. For better performance, minus 20 dB would be fine. So if your antenna have a return loss of minus 10 dB, then it is going to reflect only 1/100th of the incident power. So that's well and good, right? Its reflection is very, very less and more power could be radiated. So this is how we can improve enhancement. You can claim my antenna return loss is minus 10 dB, 30 dB. So my design will eliminate loss of energy. Reflection can be minimized, like that you can claim. And nowadays the trend is to make an antenna work for different frequency. So this is a plot of a single antenna, but it shows lower return loss at 2 different bands. So this antenna can work around this 2.8 GHz as well as this frequency. It's minus 4.6. So around 4.6 GHz also this antenna can radiate or receive signal, because its return loss is going below minus 10 dB even in this range around 4.6 GHz. So I can claim my antenna is a dual band and it can work for 2 frequencies. Like this you can do. You can make a single antenna which can work for multiple frequencies. This is possible only with microstrip antennas. With dipole, monopole and all, separately we have to make antennas for 2 different frequency. But when it comes to microstrip, it's a more compact design, and in that it is possible. With a single antenna you can make it work for multiple frequencies. So in the day after tomorrow session, we'll be talking about, I'll be indeed designing a microstrip antenna and showing the demonstrations as well in that. Okay, so this is about return loss and VSWR, a very important thing. And from these 2 classics, we understand what is the operating frequency of your antenna, what is the bandwidth of the antenna, and what is the extent of reflection from your antenna. All these factors we understand from this return loss and bandwidth. So beamwidth, just the width of the radiation pattern, right? That's beamwidth actually, already we have discussed. Then other one is front to back ratio. So the antennas, so if you when this happens is when you try to use directors and make your put arrays to make your antenna more and more directional. If you want to make it more directional in one particular angle, then what happens is there will be some leakage in the other undesired direction as well actually. So front to back ratio is very important for an array antenna actually, because I cascade many elements to focus all the energy in a particular direction, and thus that will lead to radiation in other direction as well. And the front to back ratio is the indication of the ratio of power in the desired direction and in the backward direction actually. So it indicates how much energy is wasted in the unwanted direction. And this value is more particular in arrays. If you are designing an array, then we should define what is the front to back ratio of our antenna actually. Then the last 2 factors are gain and directivity actually. And this gain and directivity will decide the direction property, in what direction it is radiating. And more than that, what's the importance of the gain is what is the radiation intensity in a particular direction. So in this diagram you could see 2 antennas. One is a parabolic dish antenna, that is a more directional antenna compared to, even you can't build arrays equal to this parabolic dish. They have a very high gain, even 20 dB or even more than that, and they'll be more directional, and even you could get 0.001 degrees beam width, like more or less like a laser beam. Like that we can make and radiate energy into deep space. Generally for deep space communication they use such sort of very narrow beams actually for scanning, to travel very long distances deep into the space. They use that actually. So today I'll tell very simply what a gain is actually. So you just consider a omnidirectional antenna. It's called an isotropic antenna, whose radiation pattern will be a sphere, practically, which is not possible in all the entire 3-dimensional space. You cannot radiate energy equally in all the angles. That's not possible, right? But that's the ideal antenna. Omnidirectional antenna is a particularly isotropic antenna. It's an omnidirectional antenna which will radiate energy in all the directions, in all the 3 dimensions. That's the important thing. So if I give some power to an isotropic source which can equally radiate in all the 3 dimensions, and let us assume, and this you see the dotted circle, that's the distance reached by that the signal. So if I'm giving a signal, some amount of power, say 1 watt, I'm giving it to a isotropic source, which is an imaginary antenna. So it can cover a region of, say, 10 kilometers, for example. That's the orange dotted line. It goes up to 10 kilometers, and the energy is scattered in all the 360 degrees, right? Now I'm having a parabolic antenna, right? I'm using a parabolic antenna, and now the same 1 watt of power is given to that. Now what happens? That parabolic antenna will not radiate energy in all the direction. Instead, it focuses all the things in a particular direction. So what happens? So the energy will travel much longer. Previously, for isotropic, we have assumed it goes up to 10 kilometers, but for this, it may go even 1,000 kilometers. The beam can reach 1,000 kilometers, right? So if I measure the signal strength at this point, for example, for isotropic source, what is the signal strength I am getting at a particular distance? Now for my antenna, what is the signal strength I am getting at a particular point? What is the signal power I will receive for if it is isotropic antenna, and if it is my practical antenna, right? So obviously for this parabolic dish, the signal strength you get at a particular point will be much more than you'll get with the isotropic source, right? So that ratio is called as gain. So you should not get confused gain of antenna with that amplifiers where we just calculate output and input. Here it's a comparison. The gain of antenna is a comparison. So how much times it will give more signal strength at a particular point when compared to isotropic, particularly a isotropic source, that's called as gain of an antenna actually. So if the gain of antenna is more, what does it mean? It can travel, your signal can reach very long distance for a given power actually. That's one thing in the transmitting side. So on the receiving side, what does it mean? With the antenna with a higher gain, even if the signal is very weak, it will be able to pick up, right? So obviously the sensitivity of your receiver will increase if you use a high gain antenna actually, right? So that's it. With respect to isotropic source, what will be the increase in the signal strength for a particular antenna? That's called as gain of an, and always it is a comparison, right? With respect to isotropic. So people sometimes you compare gain with respect to dipole also. They'll mention dB decibel dipole with respect to dipole also. With respect to dipole, how much will be the increase in the signal strength with respect of your antenna? That's also another possibility. They'll compare with isotropic source, or they may compare with dipole antenna. So when you see gain of the antenna, first you have to see whether that is with respect to isotropic source or with respect to a dipole antenna, because the meaning will be totally different, right? Okay, so directivity is gain plus the losses. If you consider the losses of the antenna along with gain, that's called as directivity actually. Okay, so antenna efficiencies gain into directivity. The product of these two gives the efficiency. So if the losses are less, then the efficiency will be more. So how we can say the efficiency is higher? You just find out gain and directivity of an antenna. In the software tool, we can make it. If both turns out to be same, then there is no antenna losses. The efficiency closes to 100%. So when you are doing research, you should find out what is the gain of the antenna as well as directivity. So if both turns out to be same, then your antenna losses are very negligible, and you can claim the efficiency is very high actually. So these are all the factors you should analyze when you design any antenna, and with these parameters you can compare with other designs actually. And I told the practical things also, particularly return loss, it should be minus 10 dB. VSWR, it should be less than 1.5. Impedance bandwidth depends upon the application we need. For beamwidth, again, the radiation pattern based on application we need. Gain and directivity, it is preferable to have 1. If your antenna have a positive number, 1 dB, that's well and good actually. So if any antenna which has a positive gain, that will be well and good. So if directivity also a positive number, and if it is closer, almost same as the gain, then the efficiency will definitely improve. And then front to back ratio is for arrays, very important factor for arrays. It's a ratio of signal power in the forward direction and in the reverse direction. For arrays only it is more significant. For single element it is not necessary actually. Okay. Okay. So various types of antennas. Okay. I'm proceeding. This picture shows, okay, any doubt in this, you can ask. I'll wait for a while. If you have any doubt, you can ask. Yes. Yes.
Sir, for gain, for implantable antenna scores negative, sir, I referred most of the papers. I think the papers.
Yes, sir. That's what. Mostly it is application, but a positive thing will be good. That's a challenge. Mostly for an implantable, not possible because you are placing it inside the body, right? So that is not
sir.
possible. What I have told is for free space. When antenna is exposed to the free space, because when you fix it inside the body, definitely one positive value is not possible, impossible. You'll get very less radiation only. That's true, sir. That's true.
Sir, one
But
more.
you can make it more less negative as possible. That's a trend you can improve upon. You can make it as less negative as possible. Okay.
Sir, one more.
Yes.
Sir, in the dipole, we are using that pipeline for increasing that beamwidth.
Dipole, we are using pipe, yes. Aluminum pipe mostly we'll use.
Here you are multiplying with 0.73 into lambda.
Yes, sir. That's what I said, no. The practical length should be 95% of lambda. So ideally, we see in the book, its length should be lambda by 2, right?
Yes,
So,
sir.
but the practical length should be 95%. That formula is to achieve 95% of that. That's a different thing. Then only you get a match between the design and the practical thing.
Yes. So last one.
Yes, sir.
Sir, here we are using 73 ohm impedance resistance for dipole.
It is for dipole. For a dipole of standard pipe, if you use,
Yes, sir.
its impedance is 73 ohms. Normally, we should see that the source is 75. But suppose if your source is having 50 ohms, then we could use some matching network. Balloons they used to have. Balance to unbalance. Matching network we should consider. If your source is having 25 ohms, yes, sir.
Which one is better, sir? 50 ohm or 73 ohm?
It depends upon the antenna. You cannot change, sir. When you use 2 rod of length lambda by 2, and if you use a metal rod, its impedance is 73, right? If you can have a source with 75, that's not possible also. So always we put a balloon. So we do not bother about what the source impedance. If you put a balloon network, it's a simple transformer with the primary and secondary winding, that will match it, and you not to bother about that. Most of the sources will have 50 ohms only. If you have any RF equipments in your lab, the standard impedance would be 50 ohms actually. If you have 75 ohms, you can test it. But for practical case, exactly we cannot expect 50 or 75 ohms from a transmitter. So all people will put a balloon, a matching balance to unbalanced matching network in between the source and the dipole to match it. That's a best option.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sir. If you have any other queries, you can mail it. We'll address in the next session, sir, day after tomorrow. So the types, you can have a look into it. I'll share the slide. Any other question?
Sir, what is the difference between dB and dBi?
So dB, that's why I was talking about dBi is the gain ratio with respect to isotropic antenna, right?
Okay, right. Sir.
Okay, dB, people, we have to find out from the source where you got. So in most of the softwares, the dB refers to dBi only. For example, if I use ANSYS electromagnetic tool, I'll get the gain plot in dB actually. It refers to dBi. In some cases, you will find dB with respect to dipole. They use dBd, they used to mention. dBi or dBd. dBd, if you have, it is with respect to dipole gain actually. That's the thing. It depends on the software. You should check the catalog of the software and what it refers to. So, yes.
Okay, sir. Thank
So
you.
it's better to add that I or D suffix. It's better to add when you mention gain of your antenna, so that it will not lead to any confusion.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Okay. Thank you all, and I thank you the organizers for giving me this opportunity. We'll meet again day after tomorrow. Thank you.